Hello everybody and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Channel Zero, The Butcher's Block, Episode 6. This one's called Sacrifice Zone. And what a finale this is. I know last week we talked about how many threads it seemed like there were left to tie up for this series and how much there was left to do. I was a little bit nervous. I felt like we're going into this thing. How are they going to satisfy everything that I want to see? And they really did a pretty good job of answering all the questions that I needed answered. Now, I won't go so far as to say this is perfect, okay? I felt like there were a few things that still left a little bit hanging, and maybe that's intentional. I don't think that they ever went into this wanting to just flatten out every possible question that you might have or resolve every possible thing that anybody could ever ask. But as a story, as an ending to this story, this works remarkably well. We start off with Izzy having escaped from the Peaches, okay? She has had Alice help her out. You know, we saw in the previous episode, Alice helped her escape, and they've gotten out. She's in her weird little fort thing. There's somebody beating down the door. I don't think we see a resolution to that. They start out with someone beating on the door, and then later on she's at the house. I kind of assumed they were going to do one of those reveals where you pull back and it's somebody that she's expecting. We never actually got that reveal, but she runs off and you know, has escaped, and the Peaches know that she's escaped. And there's some very significant stuff that happens here at the beginning of the episode. Alice takes another further step into, no, I'm definitely going with these people. Like, I didn't make a mistake. I'm not confused. I haven't, been tricked into this. I've decided that cannibalism is preferable to going crazy. And not just cannibalism, all right? That's bad enough. But that human sacrifice of innocent children to a creepy deer god is a step that I am willing to consciously take to keep this good thing that I think I have going. I'm on board with that. Alice makes that decision for Joseph Peach, and we see her with the other Peaches trooping down the stairs into the regular world, coming to get Izzy to sacrifice her to the deer god. I love this moment as they're walking down the stairs. It's such a portentous moment, and it's so genteel too. It focuses on the shoes, and it's not like a weird Quentin Tarantino focus on the shoes or the feet or whatever. It's highlighting the fact that these people are going to war and the women are wearing high heels. Like, there is this juxtaposition in the Peaches clan that is constantly there between utter horrific violence and upstanding 1950s genteel dress and talk and manners, right? These guys will eat human flesh, okay? But they're going to use the right fork when they do. I love that they've kept this completely, and Joseph Peach, especially almost until the very end, has kept his composure, has kept his calm, and he gets to the house eventually, right? And sees what they've done to his sons and has this very human moment of sorrow, not just for his sons, but we see the little Peach guy, right? The dwarf Peach or whatever, mourning for his kids, or his brothers and sisters, whatever they are, the little Peaches, and they're ready to go off and do battle. Of course, they send in Alice first, right? They send Alice in to think that maybe Zoe and Alice are, because they're sisters, that Alice will be able to talk some reason to Zoe. Zoe, of course, has had her eyes open, and she's having none of this. They've got Zoe back, or Izzy back. Man, I'm still having trouble with those names from last week. They've got Izzy back, and they're not giving her up. All right, they're ready to fight to the death. And even before they get Izzy back, Officer Vanchik is like, I'm taking these people down. It doesn't matter what happens to me. Like, yeah, I know we're gonna lose, probably. Like that's a very real possibility. But when the landlady trying to talk sense into Officer Vanchik here, she says, like, listen, I hate them as much as you do, but we're gonna lose. I think in a very real sense, Officer Vanchik's perspective, at least the way I see it, is that he's kind of already lost. I mean, really, there's not a lot left for him in this world. He's a guy who just had to shoot his dad because he realized what an awful, terrible person his dad was. And the way he realized that is that his own dad slit his throat to make peace with cannibal monsters. So this guy doesn't have a lot left to lose, and he's willing to go on his crusade here, and all of these people band together to fight the Peaches, right? They're gonna get away. There's a little bit of an interlude here where they pay off something I don't know that they really needed to set up to begin with, but it kind of has a cool little tie-in here where the loan officer that we saw calling Alice from like 3 episodes ago shows up at their house and is there to collect the loan. I've never had like a loan officer come after me for this amount of money, so I don't know if they get this rude when you don't pay, but this guy is laying into her, and Alice is not wanting to have it. Before she eats him though, right, which she does do, she's not gonna deal with these problems in a normal way anymore, but before she does jump on this problem and eat its throat out, he says to her, your debts are going to come due. Eventually you have to pay. And that's really the theme of this episode, is that you don't get to just run away from what you're afraid of. You do eventually have to turn around and face it. And we see that play out in a huge way. But before we get there, Joseph Peach, as I mentioned, not freaked out, but mourning his son's death. And immediately after mourning his son's death, I don't know exactly what the significance of how he does it is, but he gets the little dwarf guy to wipe some blood off of his face, and then he puts the rag that he used to wipe it off in his mouth and reveals his true form. And there's a little bit of a callback to Wonderland here, which I love to death. So his true form is kind of like this gray face, sort of flicker face thing, but occasionally everything disappears but the mouth. And that's such a wonderful callback to the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. And I couldn't help but be amazed at how they're sort of bringing in the Lovecraftian Wonderland, not like 100% like adapting that, right? But really sort of making homage to that kind of thing. And again, we talked about earlier how the Peaches are this collision of horrifying, animalistic, just like insanity, and also highbrow, like we're gonna have everything to a T. And it really calls to mind like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, where everything's crazy, but they are still proper English gentlemen drinking tea. They've just lost their minds. And all of that, I think, is a pretty intentional homage. Just a lot of, not like they're trying to straight adapt it or anything, but they're clearly pulling from a lot of that kind of thing. And I absolutely adore that. The tunnel, the problem, I guess, that I have with the tunnel scene is that it doesn't really progress the plot. This is one of those move a plot token from point A to point B back to point A things again. And it's a cool visual sequence to have Joseph Peach down there in the dark, and you have the flashlight shining around. And there's a great moment. I wish that I had a screenshot. I do not, and I'm not going to go to the work of looking for it. But there is a flash of a moment, and I guess flash is the right word, because they've got their flashlights, and there's these two spots on the wall, and then the flashlight is pointed in such a way that just carves this smile pattern right underneath these two eyes, like a giant creepy smiley face, which is almost exactly what they're getting on the other side when Joseph Peach is coming at them. But essentially the upshot of the scene is the Peaches get Izzy back. All right? So we had tiny amount of plot wheel spinning, but what we did accomplish there, I won't go too hard on this, because while we did move Token from A to B back to A, what we got moving it back to A was really, as I mentioned earlier, cementing that Alice is in this for real. She's not confused. She's not like tricked. This is her choice, and she's going to pay for it. Real dear in like about 10 minutes. Because the Peaches go, they set up the sacrifice. Really, I thought a beautifully iconic image of the very pregnant Edie Peach carrying the long pole with the fire on the end, getting ready to light the furnaces that would, I guess, call the deer god thing. They're not actually burning anybody up, although maybe they're burning up the bodies of their dead comrades. But they're sort of the fire, and then ancillary to that, there's also the altar. They lay her out on the altar. I guess that this is just something that occurred to me, but like initially they took Izzy to the deer god. He had, he called and ordered takeout, and they did like they brought it to him, but then the pizza was cold, so he actually, he got his refund and he had to go to the store to get the pizza. So I'm imagining that he's already irritated to have to actually work to get his food, right? It has not been delivered to him. And he comes out, and our intrepid heroes at the last second manage to steal Izzy back. And here is where the crazy woman from the beginning kind of comes back in and pays off. I mentioned this weird theory that I had that maybe the landlady was some kind of alternate something in the spirit realm, right? That she was just undercover. It's almost a Neil Gaiman-esque kind of idea. I don't know if you've ever read like Ocean at the End of the Lane, or a lot of sort of gods in human clothing, possibly American Gods as well, just sort of gods among us. And in a sense, I could see her and the crazy lady both being on that spectrum. None of that pays off, okay? It's not like, if that is true, and it's a crazy theory to begin with, they don't really like give us any fodder other than just, it's sure fun to think about. We got like a landlord and a landlady, and they're facing off against each other. Maybe she's just a person, and that's fine. And maybe the crazy lady's just a person, but that's also fine. Some of y'all did point out, though, same actress who plays the crazy lady from around town as plays the mom, which is an interesting little bit of doppelganger-dom that I think I don't know what it means exactly, but she gets Izzy away, and the deer god shows up, and the time is up. All right, so we have, first of all, Edie's giving birth with the meat man. All right, the one thing that we did leave hanging pretty heavily is whatever the meat man is. I don't know what his deal is. He was never particularly scary to me. He was just kind of like a cool visual, and he seemed to be there to help Edie give birth, and this is not definitively settled, okay, but my wife was watching that scene, and the amount of blood that came out of that woman, I know that giving birth is a dangerous and icky situation, but I think the amount of blood we see come out of her probably is not survivable in the long term. She probably hemorrhaged out when she was giving birth to whatever the latest of these things was. We don't get that resolved. We don't know if the meat man pulled the baby out and saved it for later to do something with, and we're not going to find out. Okay, it's not like there's going to be Butcher's Block Part 2 and there doesn't need to be. But I'm counting Edie as dead here, is what we're getting to. And then the deer god gets his real revenge, because he comes down the stairs, and they peek, right? There's this great line where Joseph Peach essentially sets up the ending where he says, listen, if you look at him, if you look at his sort of true form, you could go crazy. Like your brain can't take it. But the deer god managed to go down the steps. Everybody looks. Like nobody's gonna have this god thing come by that is literally unknowable and not peek between their fingers, even though they're all hiding their faces. They all look. He comes down and explodes all the peaches except for Joseph. All right? Joseph has to stand there and get the blood all over him. And the justice here is so sweet, because this is a guy who is sacrificed everything for his family. When I say sacrifice, I mean, I guess he sacrificed other people, really. But family seems to be pretty important to him. Family on some level, some kind of family, is what his deal is. And the deer god just takes that away from him in the most horrific way possible, right before taking his own life in the same way. And there's some great imagery here. From a mechanical standpoint, I was very interested in this, because the visuals that we get of sort of inside the deer god's universe, the Wendigo thing. I'm going to keep calling him the deer god because that's sort of how I think about him. They look like outer space, but I very strongly feel that they are probably like super macro photography of different liquids interacting with each other. And the reason that I suspect this is because they used a similar idea in the movie The Fountain by Darren Aronofsky. I remember watching that movie way back in the day. I got the DVD and I watched the director's commentary, because I'm the kind of nerd that watches the director's commentary. And there are scenes in that movie that take place in space, in a type of space. And Darren Aronofsky talked about the way they created that was, rather than using computer graphics or having renderings of space or pictures of space, they wanted to do something a little different but not spend a lot of money. And so they took these incredibly blown up pictures of liquids with bubbles and interfaces and stuff, and the way that these liquids looked at incredibly high resolution, I meant to say magnification, through a magnifying glass or even a microscope, was so much like space and yet had its own eerie quality. And I very much got that from these sort of weird, interstellar-ish but not quite shots of things that we got from the deer god. But Alice sees this stuff and she gets pulled in. All right, the deer god is going to get his revenge on everybody, and he kills the peaches, right? Because their thing was immortality. They were afraid to die, and so what do they get? They get to die. Alice wasn't afraid of death, though. Alice's thing was, anything is better than going crazy. And so the deer god gives her the thing that she feared the most. It opens up itself, right? It shows her what it is truly underneath, after drawing her in by looking like her mom, which is, again, more poetic justice. She becomes like her mom by looking at her mom, and gets the full dose of whatever this mind-bending insanity is, and gets sent to the loony bin. We get a great 1 year later after this. I have to say, you read H.P. Lovecraft stuff, and he talks about how there are things that you can't describe, right? That they're so mind-blowingly weird, and that there's just no words to describe them. And I've never seen a movie or a show or anything get as close to what I would assume that looked like than this show. With the edits and the way they manipulated those images, as I mentioned, I believe they're super macro photography of various liquids, but it's not just that, because they cut it together in certain ways and they bulge it out and have it meld in with all kinds of other imagery. The way they do that is so much like what I feel like that something like H.P. Lovecraft, it's creating that sense of otherworldliness in a way that I've never seen done before. And I was really impressed. I would believe that if you looked at something like that, not quite that, because obviously we all looked at it and I think we're fine. I hope we're fine. But you can imagine going crazy from what it is just on the other side of that weird veil that we're looking at. Alice gets the thing that she feared the most. And in contrast, what do we get, right? What do we see in contrast to Alice in the loony bin? We find Zoe, all right? And Zoe is not healed, okay? She did not magically get better. Beating the boss, all right, getting Izzy back alive did not fix her schizophrenia. But she's living with it, right? She's taking her meds, and she has a support group, a family. And this is where, to me, everything was just beautifully wrapped up, because to have this group of people that met together, Officer Vanchik, the landlady, Zoe, Izzy, these four people who had previously not known each other, meeting together and eating a vegetarian meal. By the way, they're very specific. There's no meat in here, which I wouldn't have had a problem if you had like some chicken or whatever, or even some ham. I'm not like bothered by meat eating, but the symbolism is that they're like absolutely on the opposite spectrum of where the peaches were. But the mirror image there is so perfect, because the peaches were in a sense about family, right? That they were wholly about preserving the family, that you keep the family going, that the family sticks up for each other, and the family does not die if they can help it. And yet here we have a different family, a family that we wouldn't have gotten if these people hadn't done the right thing. The peaches sacrificed their souls, their humanity, to remain together as a family forever. But it didn't work, because nothing lasts forever. The debt is always due eventually. But the contrast, the beautiful mirror image, for me at least, is that the people who held on to their humanity, who held that dear, found their own family, built a family where they didn't have one before. And that's just great storytelling. You just can't get around that. That's amazing storytelling, to have that kind of symmetry involved. And I absolutely adored it. Of course, we do end with a little bit of an ambiguous shot, and I think it's nice that they're just acknowledging, like, yeah, we're not clearing all this up. Dear God's still out there, weird stuff's still out there, but these people dealt with it. These people's story is done, and the meat man wanders through frame and then off again, and it's almost as if it's saying, we're all gonna have to make these decisions, maybe all the time. But not all of us are dealing with mental health, all right? Not all of us are going to face the exact same issues that these people were facing. But ultimately, this wasn't a series about mental health. And it took me a long time to figure that out. Maybe really I didn't figure it out until this episode. But the idea of this series is the point isn't mental health. The point is humanity. The point is, what do you do to avoid the thing that you fear the most? Do you give in to that fear? Do you sacrifice yourself to avoid the thing that you fear? Or do you hang on to humanity and let your fears happen? Say, that there are some things that I cannot control, but I'm not going to lose myself in trying to control them. That's what I think is being said here. And it's a beautiful story. And it operates on so many great levels because the horror imagery is strong. All right, the Joseph Peach as the creepy Cheshire cat thing is awesome, and the Meat Man is awesome, and like all of these things work on so many levels, and yet it's still a great story. So much horror storytelling is lazy because it can be, right? Because horror fans, it will generally be satisfied with a good splatter or, you know, a decent kill or some weird imagery or something like that. And yet, Channel Zero, in all of its incarnations, has never stooped to just be that. Even when it wasn't as strong as I felt it could have been in Season 1, because Season 1's my least favorite season still. It was still trying to be about, like, family and have a story to tell. It wasn't always, I mean, I don't think every season's about family, although I'm thinking about it now, and maybe it is kind of all about family or about the relationships that bind us, but it always has something like to say, at least that it's trying to say. And I adore that. I adore that we can have horror filmmaking. I say filmmaking, it's a TV series, but horror that can operate on a human level, on a storytelling level, and not lose the creepy craziness. You know, a lot of times when you have sort of highbrow horror, they're like, well, we're not going to show you the monster. All right, what's the name of the It Comes at Night last year did that. Or it's like, it's just about man and his inhumanity to... Wow, I got too highfalutin and lost my voice. It's the end of the day for me, guys. I'm recording this at night as opposed to the morning like I usually do. But, you know, it sort of, in my mind, got a little bit too highbrow for its own taste. I still enjoyed that movie. But Channel Zero has its cake and eats it too. It says, listen, we're going to tell a great story. We're going to do art, okay? But also, some people exploded into blood. And that's cool, right? I don't know of another horror thing that does both sides so well. And I'm just, we're getting another one. We're getting a 4th season for sure, because they've already shot it, and so it'd be crazy not to air it, right? I forget what it's based on, but they have another one coming in the fall, and that's awesome. So if you're looking forward to that, I will probably be on recapping that when it comes. But next up, for me at least, another one of these 10 o'clock on a Wednesday slots is Krypton. Next week they're starting Krypton. If you guys have enjoyed the recaps and you're going to be watching Krypton, tune in for that, because I will be rolling right into that next week. We're going to see if this weird time travel sci-fi before Superman show has any teeth to it. I am I'm about 50-50 right now. I gotta say, I hated the initial teasers that they kept showing over and over and over again, where it's just a guy walking up some stairs. It looked like the cheapest thing in the world. And then they started actually playing some spots that had like real special effects. And now I'm intrigued. I think this could be good. Will it cover at least the first episode and probably the whole series, unless it's just garbage. And I'll hopefully see you guys next week for that. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. I love your comments. I want to apologize. Last week, I was out of town for my grandma's funeral. I did not get to respond to as many of the comments as I like to, and it's not because you guys didn't have anything good to say. I just was out of town, and I, was talking to family, and it wasn't a bad time. I don't want anybody sending their condolences, because I'm fine, okay? It was a good funeral. She had a great life, and we got to celebrate that. But I was out of town. Didn't get to talk to you guys, but I do still really love your comments. And I also want to give a shout out to the person who thumbs down every single one of these episodes. There's one out there currently. And I love, in my mind, maybe it's just a different person each week who just didn't like something, but in my mind, there's one person out there who watched every single one of these and said, nah, I'm not good with that. But I'm going to watch next week, and you're awesome, sir or madam, as the case may be. You're the wind beneath my wings. You just keep doing what you're doing. I love it, and I will see you guys next week. Not with this, but with some Krypton recap. Take care, y'all.